to start with the proceedings. Hello everyone, greetings and a warm welcome to you from Jodhpur School of Public Health and Poornima University to another episode in the ongoing series on our journey of COVID-19. My name is Kandar Mathur and I'm an assistant professor at the Jodhpur School of Public Health and also the coordinator for the doctoral programs in public health at both Maulana Azad University Jodhpur and Poornima University Jaipur. As we all know, today is October 2, that is the birth anniversary of the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi, and our second Prime Minister, Sri Lal Bahadur Shastriji. Gandhiji's stress on the importance of cleanliness and Shastriji's lessons in simplicity and humility have surely helped us enormously during the tough times we have been facing since the last few months. I'm sure the words of these great men and their life stories will keep benefiting us and the coming generations for a very long time. You would be pleasantly surprised to know that October 2 also marks the birth of Jodhpur School of Public Health. We have turned 12 today, and there couldn't have been a better way to celebrate it than this platform with the distinguished guests from across the globe and our dear attendees. Moving on, all of you can see the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. I request the attendees to ask their questions in this section with the name of the concerned panelist typed along with the questions. I'll handle the Q&A and the chat section and keep the panelists apprised of new questions. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Anil Purohit. Anil is here in the capacity as the founder and president of Jodhpur School of Public Health. He has more than 20 years of experience in the field of global public health. He sits on boards of various institutions and organizations. He currently works for the US Department of Health and Human Services. Over to you, Anil, sir.
Thank you so much, Kandar. Welcome, everybody. It's a privilege to have you today. It's our 12th birthday. We are 12 years old today, and could not have been a better day than today to have a virtual meeting. And to start with, I would like to thank the students, the community we work with, we live in, and it's a great privilege that I have invited our first 3 students of the batch of 2008. And we started with 3 students, and today we have conferred more than 500 Masters of Public Health. I would be very comfortable saying this is the most cost-effective school of public health with the lowest budget in the world. And our students have gone across the globe to work from rural areas to CDC, US to WHO. And it's a great pleasure to have Nitin, Vikas, and Vibha with us. And I'm very thankful to all our board of advisors who have supported us in the past, and now Dr. Prasada Rao, Dr. Srinath Reddy, Dr. Rati Godrej, and everybody. And I'm sorry if I missed anybody because we are on a time plan right now. I'll tell you a little bit about the Jodhpur School of Public Health. As a student in Boston area, I used to travel to learn public health in Africa and India mostly, and always wondered why there are no schools of public health in India, except the one in Calcutta, All India School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And that made me look into various areas that how we could work on that. And I was working with the Countess Albina Dubouré at Francois Xavier Bennu FXB International while I was doing my MD PhD at Medical College of Ohio and my research work at Harvard Med School. And so she said, why don't we start one? And at that time we were funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we started putting $15,000 aside every year. But we then had a split. We are still friends. We work together. We do a lot of work together. But one night at 1:30 in the morning with Dr. Arvind Mathur, who would join us shortly, at the HIV clinic in Jodhpur, we decided to start with just the tuition. And that's where we are today, from no money, from no students, to 500 conferred MPH degrees. And I'm really thankful to all these supporters we had, especially the students. Because of them, we are here today at the Jodhpur School of Public Health. And I would give 30 seconds to each of you to say something about your experience. I would start with Vibha Joshi. Vibha is a scientist at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. She's a dentist by profession and training. She did MPH with us. She was the first one to help us start the bachelor's program in public health at the Lachu Memorial College in Jodhpur, and we supported that. And one of our colleague and MPH student and my former fellow at University of Washington's HIV fellowship program at Tamram Hospital initiated that. So Vibha, over to you for 30 seconds, not more than that.
Good evening, sir. It was a great pleasure for me to be a part and the first one to join the MPH from JSPH. And I started in 2008, finished my MPH in 2011 January, then started my journey in June 2013 as an assistant professor in Lachu Memorial College, where I was the first one to start the BSc program in public health. And then now from February 2020, I'm working in AIMS Jodhpur as a scientist in Health Technology Assessment Resource Center. And it's been a great pleasure associated with you, and still I'm associated with you as a PhD scholar.
Thank you, Vibha. Congratulations, and we're honored to have you. Without you, we would not
Thank
even
you, sir.
start Jodhpur. We would not even start Jodhpur School of Public Health. Over to Vikas Arora.
No, sir,
Vikas,
that was my pleasure. Thank you.
Vikas was also the first student, an expert in technology. 8 years ago, we started working with Ting Shi in Washington and Vikas on mHealth initiatives. And those days, we did not have COVID-19 pandemic. We started virtual sessions on mobile health. And Vikas is one of our experts. He works in Ahmedabad. He'll tell us the story. And we are still in touch. We work together. We do a lot of things together. And if you ever happen to be in Jodhpur, and if he's there, you should meet him. He'll take you to the best places to eat, hopefully after the pandemic is over. Over to you, Vikas, for 30 seconds.
Thank you very much, sir, for these kind words, actually. And thank you very much to the JSPH and Poornima University for inviting me on the occasion of completing 12 years with the public health education in this part of the world, actually. And it is a proud moment for me as well that today I am representing the institute that made a significant mark in spreading the awareness about the public health in the part of the world where nobody was aware about it. Actually, we were the first institute who bring out public health into this part of the world. JSPH was the first institute, actually, and before that nobody was knowing what was public health in this area. Even I was not knowing at that moment when I joined the first class of a JSPH, actually, introductory session where I met Anil sir and everybody. So that was a fortune turning around moment for me, actually. And I have also traveled a long way along with the journey of covering one private body part to the covering mask, actually, along with the JSPH. But my journey was less bumpy and smoother, and thanks to the JSPH, actually. So thank you very much again for inviting me and acknowledging the fact that we are existing for you guys. Thank you very much. Thanks again.
Thank you, Vikas. Vikas came from a computer science background. Over to you, Nitin. Nitin is also a scientist at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He did MPH with us. He's a dental surgeon by training, and he was on faculty at Jodhpur School of Public Health and Maulana Azad University. He's a very dedicated researcher. Over to you, Nitin, for 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for inviting me. And it has been a great pleasure being associated as a student and as a faculty with JSPH. He got a lot of exposure from as international exposure and national exposure. And we met a lot of faculties because of you and had a lot of learning from international and national faculties while I was a student in JSPH. And when I worked in JSPH as a faculty, got a lot of opportunity to write grants, and then we also worked in different projects. And thank you very much, sir, for that, because actually the exposure which I got in public health from JSPH is a tremendous one.
Thank you, Nitin. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you.
A couple of more announcements. Today, the 2nd of October, at the Poornima University, we are going to announce in the next few weeks the exact details. And we're endowing a chair, Jodhpur School of Public Health will be endowing a chair at the Poornima University. It's a very uncommon thing in India, especially at I think AIMS and IIT is been in the practice, but we are working on those details and we will keep you all updated on that. Also, have been talking to Mr. Rao and Rati Godrej and a lot of senior and expert public health professionals. We are announcing today a think tank, a global public health think tank, and Mr. Rao has accepted to be the chairman of the advisory board of this think tank. And I would be inviting most of you, and especially Heidi, Dr. Srinath Reddy, and everybody on this panel will talk more. So this is a great moment for us. A lot of things will change. We will progress. And I think this is the right time during this pandemic to start. And I think it's an urgent need. Going forward, I just need to make some announcement, which I'm required to make by some organizations and my organization. I am in the capacity of the founder of Jodhpur School of Public Health. I've got no links today with Health and Human Services of the US government or Bedford Research Foundation or whatever hats I wear. So I'm exclusively for Jodhpur School of Public Health today in that capacity. And we do not take any funding from drug companies for these webinars, nothing from the tobacco companies, nor from alcohol companies, and no child labor is involved. And I think it's very important I make this announcement. And so thank you, everybody. Over to the introductions. I'd like to introduce Rahul Singhi, who could not make it yet. He's on campus, but he's very busy today for some inspections. He's the director of the Poornima University, and it's the first time he could not make it. And he's really thankful to all of you to making it to this virtual meeting. Roy Wadia. Roy, a friend for more than a decade, extensive experience in HIV/AIDS. Right now, he's a senior communication officer at UNFPA. He's in Bangkok, has done wonderful work, and he's my Mr. Network to the HIV world in the pandemic. I know most of you know Roy, and as we talk, we will know how good moderator he is, and he'll keep us on time. Jagdish Hirsch, we met 20 years ago. He's the CEO of Mobiloid Group of Companies. We worked together. We started working 20 years ago on the HIV/AIDS real field work in rural Rajasthan. And we have been still working, and he supports JSPH with all the technology aspects. And his offices are in United States, in Singapore, England, and New Delhi. And I sit on his board. And he has been trained as a medical doctor in Russia. Glad to have you, Jagdish. The rapporteurs, Ashish is our head of department at Poornima University and head of department of JSPH at Jodhpur. Today is his birthday, so happy birthday, Ashish.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Happy birthday, Ashish.
Thank you.
He shares birthday with Mahatma Gandhi, so we won't forget that. And it's International Non-Violence Day too, I think. So remember that also, Ashish.
Yes.
And, so we're glad to have you, and you'll be our reporter. Kandar Mathur, whom you just met, he's also our reporter. Glad to have you, Kandar. And over to you, Roy and Jagdish, to start the panel. Neeraj has a hard stop, and we'll go from Roy's directions now. Thank you all again.
Thank you so much, Anil, and you've actually gone slightly over time yourself, so naughty. Jagdish, why don't you go first, and then I'll follow after you. Over to you, Jagdish.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Roy. I just wanted to introduce Indic Chain, the latest initiative of Mobiloid group of companies along with JSPH. We are a digital skills wallet, and we are in a learning records management system on blockchain and artificial intelligence, and it's about reskilling. And the idea is to introduce this to the digital health programs going on across the world and reskilling. Thank you so much. Because in the interest of time, I'll just keep it short. And Roy, back to you, please.
Thank you so much for that, Jagdish, and good evening to you all from Bangkok, where it's been stormy and raining. And yes, this is a pretty significant day, I would say, in many ways, for reasons that we all know have been on the television, internet, and all sorts of platforms all day. And that is, of course, the news that President Trump and his wife, Melania, have actually contracted COVID-19. And so in a way, this makes the seminar, the webinar that we have right now, all the more relevant and newsworthy perhaps. And we have lots of truly interesting speakers and guests with a wealth of knowledge. As you know, the series is called From AIDS to COVID-19, lessons learned along the way. And I would say that many of our guests, if not all, have actually had experience along the entire trajectory. As we know, HIV was first, shall we say, diagnosed, officially known about some 30 odd years ago, and has been around probably for much longer than that. COVID-19 has been with us, as far as we know, for not more than 9 months to a year, possibly. And so two very different viruses, but of course, linked in so many other ways. And our first guest in the section, which we call Lessons Learned in Mental Health and Behavior, linked to COVID-19 and also to HIV, is he's come all the way from Washington. Thank you so much, Dr. Neeraj Mistry. Just a few things about him before we start the session. Neeraj is a global and public health executive and physician with more than 20 years experience in nonprofits, business, academia, and all sorts of other organizations. He is from South Africa, actually, and at this time he is a professor at Georgetown, and he is in the Department of International Health. And it says over here that there he applies the lens of equity, diplomacy, and empathy to what he studies and what he teaches. So Neeraj, turning to you, and this is a pretty broad question, but perhaps you can focus and crystallize it. What have we learned about human behavior change in the response to HIV/AIDS that we can now apply to COVID-19? Over to you.
Thanks so much, Roy, and thank you, Anil, for having me and the organizers for arranging this very distinguished panel. I'm humbled to be honored. And let me say happy birthday to the School of Public Health. You're almost a teenager, so you're entering an interesting time now. You know, it's a short time, but I wanted to touch on 3 particular points. And the first is the issue of resources. And for our work in public health, we always are challenged with this question of resources. And you know, from an economist point of view, we always talk about resource scarcity. But I want us to look over the past 100 years in human history and civilization, what we've achieved. And with technological shifts and the advent of antibiotics and vaccines and surgical techniques and systems, in the past century, we've changed the outcomes on human survival and morbidity or mortality. And when we think about resources, we think about resources in terms of money most of the time, financial resources. But let's also look at technological resources, human resources, the networks that we have, the infrastructural changes that we have. And so I like to think about this time as the most resource abundant time that we have in human history. And so when it comes to addressing HIV/AIDS or even the COVID pandemic, it's about the appropriation of these resources that we have to actually get the maximum impact of it. And something we learned from HIV was, you know, we changed HIV from a death sentence to a chronic disease, and that's with antiviral therapy. And similarly, we've gotten a cure for hepatitis C, and we have management for hepatitis B from all this research and development. And I think there's interesting efforts underway now to look at how we take repurpose antivirals and cocktails to use against COVID as well. So that's an important lesson. But with all these resources we have, we also have to go back to the basics. And I think this is something that we also learned in HIV, that the element of human behavior change to reduce disease transmission is critical. And with COVID, we talk about it as NPIs, non-pharmaceutical interventions. And I remember how much we struggled to get people to use condoms, to reduce unsafe sex practices, to provide injection safety and needle substitution. And similarly, what we're seeing in COVID is the use of face masks, social distancing, these non-pharmaceutical interventions, which are shown to be effective, have a huge human behavioral change component to it. In the United States, you can see a distinct correlation between the use of masks and not, based according to party lines. And so this is one of the big challenges that we have to take on. And another lesson from HIV is when it comes to behavior change, we cannot do this without engagement of local communities. It cannot just be a top-down, here's what you need to do, but we need to get that ownership, buy-in, and full participation, not just token participation of communities that are affected by this.
Thank you so much for that. The next question that I have for you here is about the private sector and what role it can play at this time. Of course, the private sector has been a huge player in HIV and so many other situations. And at this time, what role can it play, drawing on what we have seen in the past?
That's a great question. And you know, it's been interesting because when we look at the global challenges of HIV, and we looked at it in the past, and now we have COVID, there is no single sector that can take on these global challenges. Infrastructure-wise, distribution, the competencies and skills that are required for it. And this is where the private sector is quite interesting. Now, in no way am I saying the private sector should be a substitute for the government sector, which is probably the largest infrastructure we have. But they have very unique skills and capabilities that we can bring. So one, when a business leader speaks to his employed workforce, he has a captive audience. So in terms of getting a message across, in eliciting behavior change, there's huge potential for that. We as public health people, we speak to government all the time, etc., and we would deliver the message. But governments pay more attention sometimes when a business leader has to speak about a health issue. So there's an advocacy component to it. And then when we look at behavior change, it's interesting because when you look at the media and communications companies, they deliver the message in a very different way that has an emotional appeal, that has a psychological appeal, that is not the rational way in which we make an argument from a health or medical point of view. That together with things like logistics, distribution, infrastructure, and not to mention technology, which is now huge, whether we look at big data analytics or actually leveraging technology for messaging and public health programming. So there's a lot that the business sector can bring in terms of skills, competencies, products and services. But the important thing is to realize is that those need to fit into a broader public health program than be standalone on their own.
Thank you. And the final question that we have for you is actually going back from data and technology to, shall we say, real people. And we know that when we spoke about HIV/AIDS, and we still do, we speak about key populations, vulnerable populations. And we're also the same terminology when it comes to COVID-19. And I'm wondering from your perspective whether these terminologies are actually useful and whether you can expand upon how we refer to those who are vulnerable and how that plays into the response to HIV, COVID, and so many other things.
So that's interesting, and this is an area I've been quite curious about on the power of nomenclature, the terms that we use and how they influence. And it's interesting to look at vulnerability and resilience being two sides of the same coin, and it's how we want to actually present it. I think a sort of very neutral term we're using at the moment now is at-risk communities. And what I think we learned from HIV that applies now is that the at-risk communities aren't necessarily discrete groups on their own. When we looked at HIV, we talked about mobile men with money, we talked about women of reproductive age, we talked about migrant workers as risk groups. But all of a sudden we saw that there was an intergenerational, two different cohorts that were interacting, and it was intergenerational sex that was a huge driver of the epidemic. And when we look at COVID, it's interesting because we know that the elderly and people with comorbid illness, which happen to also be many of the elderly, are at risk. But it was the intergenerational engagement between the young students going out and partying, coming back and visiting their older relatives that actually created this interaction. So while they weren't an at-risk group for getting the disease in a severe way, they were an at-risk group of actually transmitting to the disease to those who were at higher risk. And I think that's an important point to think about in our programming of disease transmission and vulnerability and those groups that are at risk. So it makes us think about it in a more sort of integrated way and a milieu of the disease epidemic.
Thank you so much. And I think with that, we need to end this particular segment. We could actually talk to you all day, in the sense that from your final answer, there may be a paper or even a book waiting in the wings. So with that, thank you so much, Dr. Mistry. And now over to Jagdish.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Roy. It was actually a very good session with Neeraj. Thank you. Now we are going to talk about the mental health, one of the most underrated things, and with the COVID around. And we have been talking about with a lot of people with their personal experiences, people who have comorbidities, people who are with or without the COVID test. The mental health is one of the most underrated things, and especially in this part of the country. I'm happy to introduce you to Ashwin Naik. He has been an entrepreneur and author on the mission to catalyze the well-being and impact. He is also he has launched multiple healthcare organizations like helpline for mental health support for COVID-19 also, which is Mana Wellness platform. I'd love to learn more from you, Ashwin, about it. Vatsalya and Serenity, and also We Scale Impact. He is also the author of 2 books, which is the Healthcare Game Changers, which profiles innovations around the world which have the potential to change the way healthcare is delivered. And The Change Starts Young, a book about young change makers who are starting as early as 11 years old. Wonderful, Ashwin. Ashwin, I have 2 or 3 questions to you, which, as I said, mental health has emerged as one of the biggest things in recent months, especially. Are there any specific segments of the population which are more vulnerable? Number one. The number two part of the same question is, do you think people with known comorbidities are doubling up on their mental stress and mental health? And of course, this is the problem, but what are the solutions, and how can the government and public health institutions possibly can do the capacity building or find ways, innovations to address this at this juncture when this is going to impact the socioeconomic status of the people who are in the mental health dilemmas and issues. And with India having the history, and in the Indian perspective, India having the history of taking mental health lightly, overall in the public health scenario, this is ever more important that you please guide us on how it can be handled. Over to you, Ashwin.
Thank you, Jagdish. Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Anil, for inviting me. Jagdish, to start with, I think while we are very concerned about what's happening in India, but when it comes to mental health, I think every country is a developing country, right? It doesn't matter which part of the globe you are. I think mental health is a serious emerging issue. The second part is that COVID is not the reason. COVID is a wake-up call, but the fire was burning many, many years ago, right? It's not the beginning of mental health issue. So I think we have to look at this as a wake-up call, which COVID is. But the challenge is if we just link it to COVID, we might just put a snooze and go back to sleep. I think that's a big challenge that we have. The second part that you wanted to address is what are the vulnerable groups? I think it's across the board, the significant impact the illness has had is on all our mental health, whether we're infected or not. I think this is playing on our minds in various ways. But having run this mental health helpline over the last 6 months, which is a free helpline people call from all parts of the country, what we have realized is that it's impacting the youth in a disproportionately, disastrous manner. And I'm talking about young people who are, imagine you're a young graduate entering the workforce at this time. This is the worst time in human history to be looking for a job. And then you have all these health concerns. So I think the young people are going to be severely impacted, and none of us in our generation have ever come into adulthood at this kind of situation. India, 60% of our youth are less than 35 years of age. So, and juggling between not having productive employment and then the uncertainty of what is going to happen, I think is having a significant impact. So my sense is if we have to deal with this in a serious manner, we have to start much early and possibly at the teenager level, at the school level, trying to educate young people about how to manage their mental health. And just to clarify, this is not about mental illness. I think all of us need support in dealing with mental health. And I think we start at teenager level. And I think that's the place to focus on. The second part of your question about what can organizations like public health schools do is really to start emphasizing that mental health is a public health issue. I think it's got a risk of being labeled as a medical issue, which it is, but it's not the whole truth, right? So I think figuring out how to integrate mental health education into public health curriculum would be one place to start looking at, building the building blocks for managing this. The second part of this is we don't have enough qualified professionals, whether it is psychiatrists or psychologists, and we will never have. The only way to deal with this is to build capacity at the community level, where we can upskill people to identify risks upfront and use the community as the first step of intervention rather than waiting for the medical system to kick in. And we've seen how that has impacted when public health has been neglected and medical care has been put on the forefront. So my push will be that let's focus on building capacity for young people and integrating mental health into public health curriculum and practice.
Thanks, Ashwin. You have raised a very interesting point about the jobs and the timing is wrong. I also run a company called Mobiloid, and we do a lot of campus hires. And right now, campus hiring is going on, and we clearly feel that people are, we want to hire them, and a lot of people are declining because either they do not have the systems or infrastructure at home to work, and that's adding to their mental health, and they have a job from us and they are not able to take it up, or they do not have the wherewithals to come to Delhi and work here. So it's definitely, these are very turbulent times. I fully agree with you, Ashwin. Love to have chat offline about some kind of a manual for them, especially campus hire going on across the country. All the IT companies, other companies are hiring people, young people, and that's something which is which can help, I think, thousands of them if there is a manual around it, which will not require experts. Thank you, Ashwin, for your time. And over to you, Roy. We are on time, Ashwin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Let me switch on my camera. And yes, from the mental health arena, concerns, fears, worries, and as you said, this is not just about one aspect of mental health. This is also something much more broad, something much more diffuse that truly impacts, I think, pretty much everyone at this time in one way or the other. Let's flow from that into something that will also, I think, feed into this story, which is the theme of vaccine confidence. And this segment that we are just about to start is called the COVID-19 vaccine. Will we ever have it? And to speak about vaccine confidence, we have the lead of the Vaccine Confidence Project, which has been around for a while. Work is possibly even more compelling and more critical at this time. And we have with us from London, I believe, if I'm not wrong, Dr. Heidi Larson, who is in charge, as I said, of the Vaccine Confidence Project. She was also at one time the head of the Global Immunization Communication Program at the Children's Fund. And she also chaired Gavi's advocacy task force, on the WHO SAGE working group on what we call vaccine hesitancy. And I should say that the current organization that she heads, the Vaccine Confidence Project, is a World Health Organization center of excellence to actually talk about vaccine hesitancy and focus on that. So there are, of course, many, many more things that I could speak about Heidi's background. There's a long bio here, but let's go to the theme of this segment, which is, of course, vaccine confidence at the time of COVID-19. As I said at the start of this webinar, this has been a truly momentous news day with President Trump and his wife having contracted COVID-19. It's the only story on all channels at this time. And we, of course, know that there has been controversy about how the US has handled COVID-19 and the messaging that's been coming out of the White House, off and on, more on than off. So Heidi, seeing all of this in the big picture, but also narrowing down to specifics, what do you say at this time about vaccine confidence and how it applies to the ongoing quest for a vaccine for COVID, and what might happen once we actually have one? Over to you.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully. Let's see. Interesting talks. I think they set the stage well for what I'm about to talk about, particularly the comment on the mental health, that COVID is not the beginning of mental health. COVID is also certainly not the beginning of the issues we're facing with vaccine confidence. I don't have a 12th birthday for the Vaccine Confidence Project, but this year is our 10th year, and this month, or actually it was in September, we published a pretty large study in The Lancet called Global Trends in Vaccine Confidence, and we developed 5 years ago a vaccine confidence index, because there was no, you'd hear people say, oh, it's getting worse, or it's here or there. But you can't really honestly say something's getting worse without a benchmark. So we set it our task to develop a globally comparable index, and have been running that in multiple times since 2015. And the study looks at about 285,000 respondents over the last 5 years, looking at trends. And the Financial Times made a much nicer map than we had that kind of looked at axes of confidence in the effectiveness and confidence in safety. We look at confidence in importance, safety, effectiveness, and compatibility with religious beliefs as 4 domains of confidence that we think are particularly influential on vaccine confidence. India is doing well. That's good news. Europe is the least confident in the world, and Japan is an outlier in the worst over in France, but I think they tell the story of how one particular vaccine issue, in their case HPV, and an 8-year suspension of the proactive recommendation by the government because of paralyzed by public dissent has put them in a different place. But it takes one to tip the boat. We have maps 2015 on the left, 2018 on the right, and you can see the darker red you get, the least confidence, the darker blue you get, the most positive outlook. And overall, the good news is in the last 5 years, partly because in the last decade, there has been a bit of a wake-up call to the public health and global community that actually vaccine hesitancy is not just on the fringe, it is starting to erode acceptance. So that kind of wake-up has made a difference in the sense of people, there has been a bit more proactive effort to rebuild confidence. It's slow, but it's improving. Especially in the domains of vaccines are important and vaccines are effective, but when it comes to safety, it's less good. Safety seems to be the Achilles heel, or I should say perceptions of safety issues still seem to be the Achilles heel. And that was one area where actually confidence got worse in India. If you can, oh no, it did a bit better. There's pockets that I'm thinking of, but overall, it was less than the other two. But the good news is the overall trend is getting better, but that is because of consistent vigilance and increasing attention to the issue. In terms of change over time, Indonesia and the Philippines had significant drops in confidence. Indonesia had the biggest drop in the world, and that was because there was quite a allowed you, I'm sure you're aware, a sensitivity in the Muslim population feeling that vaccines were not halal, and there were a lot of undermining of a big measles rubella campaign that has taken a long toll on the overall confidence. The challenge of vaccine confidence and confidence, anxieties has also become quite global. It travels. Social media has been a huge vector of the viral spread of emotions and anxieties. And we continue, some of our maps in the Confidence Project look a bit like the airline, the airplane routes in the back of your airline magazines. It travels very quickly. And we see diasporas of sentiments traveling to different countries in language groups. Poland had a severe anti-vaccine group that had dropped confidence there, but we saw the knock-on effects in Polish communities in Scotland and in England. We've seen the same with different populations and languages. These things now spread globally. We've been increasingly looking at, and against that background of overall confidence issues, we've been looking more specifically at the COVID vaccine. We have a number of surveys in process now. I just pulled this one, I'm sure you've seen a number of surveys in different places. This one happens to be one from the World Economic Forum. What we're doing is pulling together multiple surveys, not only our own, but others, to look at where, to get a meta look at these things. It's highly varied, but to us, what was interesting is that the confidence and positiveness versus disagreement about accepting a vaccine is highly correlated with background issues of vaccine confidence more broadly. So what we look at is the confidence level in a COVID vaccine similar to partly because of this background rate of confidence or lack of it, or is this a uniquely COVID vaccine issue? In which case it may be more fixable, as it were, or improvable. One of the things that we look at, we often talk about the 3 Ps. It's about confidence in the product, the vaccine in our case, the provider, the health provider, or in the policymaker and politician. Trust in government is particularly a particular lever of trust in vaccines, because governments regulate, they sometimes provide, and sometimes require or mandate vaccines. So if you don't have a good trust relationship with the government, it can be played out on vaccines because they touch every individual on the planet, and anything that happens at a population-wide level is vulnerable, especially in areas where you have minority or marginalized groups that do not trust the government. We saw in our question about confidence in religion, compatibility with religious beliefs, that the same religious group would in some countries have high confidence in vaccines, and the same religious group but the same religious group in another country would have low confidence. And what we saw was this pattern that if you were a minority religious group in a dominantly, in a country with another dominant religion, it affected your vaccine confidence, which means that it wasn't about the religion, it was about the role of a minority government and a minority group. And that marginalization issue, which is an important distinction. COVID vaccines, where are we? There are nearly 250. We had the LSHTM has a vaccine tracker, if you go online. The latest is, and this was just from today, I made sure it was the most update one, nearly 250 vaccine candidates, meaning everything from at the bench in the laboratory, and out of that, 45 of them have made it to clinical testing in humans. Different stages, as you can see, only 9 well, not only 9, but 9 have made it to phase 3, which is pretty remarkable given the short period of time. We see a lot of headlines about fast, warp speed. This university is going to get there first, this company. But the news does not talk about why it's fast. And I think that's important for publics to know, because the fastness is the biggest anxiety that we're seeing in our surveys and research with publics. The fast language is not helpful. It makes it feel like the systems are being shortcut, it's not safe. When in fact, we've been able to do it fast because we had a funding mechanism, CEPI, Coalition Epidemic Preparedness, that didn't exist before Ebola. We did learn something from Ebola, that when a new virus hits, or a new virus reemerges, we didn't have a fund for rapid funding for a vaccine. And now we did for COVID, and it meant that immediately some could get started. We also have platforms, new technologies. The virus itself was characterized much quicker than usual. We're not celebrating the reason that these things are moving faster. It would also help alleviate the anxieties that we're just shortcutting old processes. The other thing is things are moving ahead. I mean, this is a remarkable situation where actually vaccines that aren't yet proven are being produced en masse. The ones that are the closest to hoping to be shown effective, in case they become effective, because we have, time is against us. And already negotiations are being heard. I mean, attention goes on the US, but the reality is, in the meanwhile, Indonesia is negotiating for 30 million doses from China and the UAE. Russia is selling reports show 100 million vaccine doses to India. In the background, research are questioning it, but things are moving forward. There's a very dynamic situation going on now. The other aspect that's happening, I mean, we're full of uncertainty around COVID, which is part of the understandable anxiety of publics about the COVID vaccine, among a lot of things. But I think we also, as a community, need to get better information out about what is COVID. It is not the flu. It is not a serious and potentially fatal illness that if you get through a couple weeks or even a few weeks of serious illness, it's done. This is increasingly being called long COVID. And we haven't seen the end of long COVID because it's still brand new. We don't know if it's only 6 months of extended symptoms or this will continue much
I
longer.
think we have to wrap in about a minute, please. Thank you.
That will help build people's confidence in a vaccine. So despite all this rapid evolution of technologies and that is possible, we still have this resistance. And in fact, we thought vaccine hesitancy would go down in the face of this threatening illness. Actually, it's joined up with anti-mask, anti-protest groups. So we do have a challenge ahead. And I think we can't, as I'm sure everyone here knows, I think we have a risk of having so much focus on COVID that other health issues are losing track. And just at a basic level, childhood vaccines, we risk some major outbreaks of totally preventable, totally familiar issues. And then there's the flu shot. It's the World Economic Forum here who, I think it's important, and that's what AIDS had on its side, that multiple players get a flu shot. I just came out with a book this month called Stuck, which has a lot of stories about these issues, the stories behind the stories. This is our website. We're doing a lot on COVID. We're trying to update it with news as we see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for having pushed you. That was fascinating, and the website is vaccineconfidence.org, and the book is Stuck. Moving from Heidi to actually comment upon what you've just heard, we've got Dr. Srinath Reddy, who's in charge of the Public Health Foundation of Dr. Reddy needs no introduction. He has been on this program series many a time. He is globally renowned. He is consulted by the World Health Organization. Dr. Reddy, your take on what you just heard and how it applies to India, and if we had a vaccine and it had been, shall we say, rushed through, do you think the Indian public would be keen to go out and get a jab? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me first start by congratulating the Jodhpur School of Public Health on crossing 12 years and entering what I would say are the terrific teens. I wouldn't say terrible teens. I wish the teens are terrific. Now, in terms of what Heidi said, I fully agree with her that we need to approach the question of vaccine hesitancy and vaccine resistance in a fairly thoughtful manner. And particularly because this is a new virus and which is throwing surprises every day at us, and we are still unsure whether we are going to be getting a safe and efficacious vaccine and when it will arrive, we have to be particularly cautious now. We do agree that irrational, prejudiced, and virulent opposition to vaccines is a major threat to public health and can undermine our efforts to contain this epidemic. But also, we have seen, even in the case of the HPV, there was a lot of resistance to that because of some trials being conducted in a relatively questionable manner, or at least portrayed as being conducted in a questionable manner, to the extent that HPV is not introduced as a part of the government program now. But even for polio and a number of other vaccines we have seen in India, resistance comes when there is a misunderstanding or a misinformation campaign. For example, people have felt, particularly among the minorities, that this was a program, even some of the earlier vaccines, which were intended to prevent polio, were actually clandestine population control programs. So misinformation can be a terrible threat, and we ought to be very, very clear that we ought to counter that. And we also must recognize that simultaneously, we must also avoid irrational exuberance in portraying the vaccine as imminently at hand and going to be absolutely safe and efficacious and possibly even long-lasting in terms of protective effect. Till the trials are completed, we cannot make such claims. And therefore, it is incumbent upon public health also to act with responsibility and make sure that we are not conveying prematurely a false impression to the people. But particularly when we know that other vaccines, including the HIV vaccine, have not really materialized, and SARS-1 vaccine has had a problem with antibody-dependent enhancement. So safety issues, efficacy issues, and durational protection, all of these are things that we would have to really deal with and then convey them to the public in a very convincing manner. And while doing so, we must recognize that while a public health emergency must spur research and development of vaccines, we must not stampede science. And we must ensure that we are handling science in a responsible manner. We are employing science for research, but we are investing in hope. And at this point in time, we still do not know when and whether the hope will be actually fulfilled. But let's proceed with the assumption that we would have one or more effective vaccines. But then the question of misinformation, vaccine resistance, all of these need to be countered, as Heidi said, by building trust. And for that, we need also to engage the community from right now onwards and be extremely open in our communication, both with what we believe are our hopes and what we believe are our concerns. And unless we share the information widely in the public and make them as co-passengers in our journey towards the development of the vaccine, the testing of the vaccine, verification of its efficacy, safety, and possibly of duration, we will be actually throwing surprises at them. And suddenly one little reported anecdote of a major side effect can throw us off the track. So it is very important for us to talk about what the potential effects of the vaccine may be in terms of even minor and even sometimes maybe little more than minor side effects. So everybody is mentally prepared for that so that we do not get the media writing shrill stories that somebody has got some very adverse effect. But at the same time, it's also very important for us to give them the confidence that this is not a campaign that's being engineered by the industry for commercial motives, because that is something that can really turn the community against you. And even in the case of the transverse myelitis, which was reported in the UK, it was unfortunate that the industry representative actually spent more time in communicating much more information and earlier to the investors than to the regulators or to the general public. So that is the kind of conduct that we must avoid, where science must be seen to be not driven by commercial motives, though industry is, of course, necessarily a very valued partner in developing the product and disseminating the product. Therefore, it is absolutely important for us to carry the community with us, engage the media, engage the other people who are likely to be important influencers in the community, not necessarily only film stars, but even people who are embedded in the community and are the local opinion makers, and therefore involving the civil society and the community groups in this conversation, even as we are moving towards the development and verification of a vaccine, it's going to be important. So just as the WHO Director General said, perhaps a little too exuberantly, test, 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 may I say, communicate, communicate, communicate. Because unless we actually open the channels of communication widely open, we are likely to be seeing that we will have the risk of suddenly vaccine resistance building up from unexpected quarters, and then we'll have to fight the battle as a rearguard action. Therefore, whether it is safety issues or the efficacy issues, we'll have to look at it, because after all, we know the vaccine against SARS virus 1 failed because of the original antigenic sin. And we also have to make sure that neutralizing antibodies and T-cell response is also adequate. So this is a meticulous effort that is required but every step of the journey must be shared openly to the scientific community, to the media, and also may not be necessarily in terms of the technical jargon, but in terms of where our hopes lie, where our concerns lie with the wider community. And unless they partner us in this effort, unless there is a people-partnered public health movement, we will find vaccines will always meet some resistance from unexpected quarters, and that is a battle lost even before it is fought. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Srinath. You actually said something very similar in some ways to what our next guest said at the previous webinar. And we have with us now JVR Prasada Rao, who, as you all know, was the head of the National AIDS Control Organization quite some time ago. And then he was with the UNAIDS for several years in several capacities, including being in charge of the Asia Pacific office. And he is now a senior public health luminary, and he is doing multiple things on multiple fronts, including being more involved with the Jodhpur School of Public Health, as we heard from Anil. So Prasada, your thoughts on what Heidi said, what Srinath said, the issue of trust, the issue of inclusion. Having heard them, what are your thoughts this evening? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Roy. I think you have been nice to me on more than one occasions. We are meeting on this webinars. Thanks you once again. But before I launch into this vaccine issue, I think I must first congratulate JSPH for this 12 years of very, very fruitful, service to the public health community. And I think looking back 2005 to 2008 looks like a most momentous period in India's public health history, because two major initiatives, the Public Health Foundation of India and then the JSPH schools, have been launched within those 3 years. 2005 PHFI, 2008 is JSPH. And both the founder members are here, Dr. Srinath Reddy and Dr. Anil Purohit. So I congratulate both of you first. I think let me do that before I start my intervention. Well, coming to the vaccine issue, well, I feel I get a sense of deja vu, because I remember in 99, 2000, etc., when IAVI came very strongly about the AIDS vaccine, there was a big scramble to just know when the AIDS vaccine is going to be there. Knowing fully well that it's not that easy, so we never raised the expectations of people so much. We have been very guarded in saying that, look, this is a very dicey thing, don't expect too much, focus on your interventions, focus on prevention, focus on treatment, and if a vaccine comes, fine, it's nice. But in the case of COVID, I somehow see this mad scramble that is going on, almost saying that yes, it is going to be there tomorrow, and I think all our problems are going to be solved. And unfortunately, the vaccine development, at which it is still there, as Heidi has shown, there are still some in phase 3, very few, 9 or 10 are in phase 3. So already politics got into it. Now we're already talking about who is going to distribute, is going to be available in public domain. I mean, these are issues will come when you already have a vaccine. We don't have it right now. It is still science, and science should be left to scientists. I mean, that is the bottom line. And it is not being done, and everyone, I only use the word non-scientists, are getting into the vaccine business at this moment, which I think is very, very, very disturbing, I would say. Because the credibility of vaccination depends upon the trials, and especially the phase 3 trial. And it has to be done very openly, very transparently, no cutting the corners there. If somebody is talking about introducing and then doing it like a phase 3 trial, I think we are erring on the wrong side. That is not going to work. So we have to be very careful about the phase 3 trial, and that need to happen within the population where it is going to be used. You can't say that it's working in US, so it should work in India. It's not going to be that way. You have to conduct the phase 3 trial in the population where you are going to use. That is very important so far as the science of the vaccine is concerned. And you need to have an independent technical panel or a body which should provide advice to the government on the efficacy of a particular vaccine. It's not just government goes around scouts and says that, no, this is good for me. No, that is not going to help, you are going to have serious credibility problems if the government on its own goes and picks up a particular vaccine for introduction. So that is one thing. Now coming to the actual use, I mean, let's hope a vaccine comes and it is efficacious, and then it is tried on Indian population and it is going to be brought or launched for use. But are we ready for that? That is the most important part. There is going to be a real competition of who is going to get the vaccine first. And we all know that which are the vulnerable groups. They are all the people with comorbidities. We have no information. I think that is the most important thing to do right now, to have a database within the country of people who have comorbidities. Recently, we have taken a small initiative in West Bengal to conduct a comorbidity survey in Kolkata. It has been done, and it has been very well done by involving people who are the COVID warriors, who are already affected by COVID. That means there is real community participation in conducting the comorbidity survey. And this is something I recommended to the health secretary the other day when I was talking to him. Please see that this sort of a survey is done throughout the country with the help, with the participation of the state governments, so that when the vaccine comes, you are ready to whom it should be given. You can set priorities very easily. So those are the type of priorities I think which need to be addressed. Second is the adverse event monitoring. This is very, very important when it comes to a vaccine. This can happen at the time of trial. This can happen at the time of actual use also. But if something like that happens, I think we need to have a mechanism by which we can quickly get into the field and find out why that adverse event has occurred, and then be very transparent with the people, with the civil society, why that thing has happened. If there is an attempt to hush it up or to make it confidential, then as Dr. Reddy has said, everything is going to stop. And we have seen that happening in the case of a very simple thing like injectable contraceptive in India. Bangladesh is using injectable contraceptive for the last 20 years. We have not been able to introduce even now, which is one of the most effective, most efficacious type of contraceptive for family planning. Mainly because something went wrong and then the transparency was not there. So there is organized opposition, everything stopped. And nobody is there, nobody is going to taking the initiative to bring it back. So such a thing in the case of COVID vaccine. So I would say that is very, very important, the adverse event monitoring. And third is the cold chain. Do we have the mechanism to have a cold chain throughout the country to see that the vaccines reach? Whatever cold chain we have in this country can reach only up to 80 million people out of the 1,200 million that we have. That's for children and mothers. How do we scale up to a population of 1,200 million to see that the vaccine reaches? You need to look at other cold chains like agricultural cold chain, like pharmaceutical cold chain, and try to do linkages with them. All these things need to be planned right in advance. So there's a lot of preparation which need to happen. And finally, I think the involvement of the community is very, very important. I think Dr. Reddy has already said, I don't want to repeat. There has to be a very organized IEC campaign which need to happen with the involvement of communities. And it is not something new for India. We have done it in the case of HIV. We have done it in the case very successful in the case of polio. Polio gained acceptability only because of the involvement of local community, wherever there is organized resistance. And Haiti has shown a figure of 4.8%. I'm afraid that is a huge number for India. The percentage-wise it may look small, but that 4.8% can disrupt anything because it consists of really important sections of society, like even some of the active members of civil society, the social media, the minority community. Any one of them can pick up the thread and say that no, it's not going to happen. Then you are stuck. So I think we need to sort of keep a very focused IEC campaign with the involvement of communities ready so that we can launch it whenever there is a vaccine. So I think before vaccine and after vaccine, these are two stages which are important, which I think government needs to address right from the beginning. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prasada. I just love the way you synthesize all that we've heard so far into your and you actually touched upon so many of the points that Heidi did, Srinath did, our first guest did, and that actually flows us into our next guest, who is Dr. Monica Lakhanpal. She joins us from London, and I know that you had some connection issues earlier, so I hope that we see you clearly and we hear you clearly too. Dr. Lakhanpal is a renowned pediatrician. She is an academic. She has worked with the, I think, the Children's Fund as well. And when we had you on the show or the series, it was last week, you spoke, I think, quite passionately about the mental health of young people amid COVID. And today we want you to focus on the vaccine issue and how it also links with children. And from your perspective and your years of practice, what can you tell us about the importance of childhood, shall we say, vaccination, immunization, and how it feeds into the ongoing COVID-19 debate? Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for inviting me again to talk. It's always very humbling following Professor Reddy and Dr. Rao and Heidi to talk about similar issues and cover some similar issues. However, I hope I can give a perspective really as a pediatrician. So I'm not a person who is involved in the vaccine trials as such, but I'm somebody who's at the coalface, engaging with the families and engaging with the children. But I think it's important for us just to be able to remember, let me see if I can do this, to really go back to the beginning, really, to think why we're actually here and why we're trying to take forward vaccinations. So just to cover a little bit, we know why we want vaccinations for children, and I'm focusing only really on children. And the whole reason for this has been to try and protect children from many, many diseases that have had an impact on their lives and their mortality. The WHO, we know, has said that immunization currently prevents 2 to 3 million deaths every year, and this number will keep changing, of course. And that's huge, and I think we shouldn't forget why we have been driving such an intense immunization program for so long. In 2019, 20 million children, however, missed out on life-saving immunizations, measles, diphtheria, tetanus vaccines. And that means we've got a whole cohort of children who are not actually being vaccinated at all. We know that there's been scares before. We've talked about safety and scares, mixed messages, and this has been a common theme throughout the last decade or so when we've been using immunizations. We've heard the autism story that completely threw us away from the program that we were trying to have. And 86% of infants worldwide received 3 doses of DTP3 vaccine during 2019. Again, that's 86% of infants received that, so not as many as we would want them to. These are the immunization programs that show how they developed from 1964 to 2019. So we've been doing something right. We have been increasing our immunization program. We've been getting confidence from the families. The families have been participating in this. But as we've heard earlier, every time there's a hiccup, we then lose families and we lose that coverage that we've been working so hard against. So for now, we have about 16 diseases that we could prevent were everybody engaged with the immunization program. So what are we saying about the vaccination program in India? Well, this is just a slide to show you the impact of the polio vaccination program. And again, we've heard a little bit about that. That was a very, very effective vaccination program that really eradicated polio and made India a polio-free country. So no cases of wild polio reported in for 5 years. And that's hugely important. And why has this been possible? Because we've said we take the community with us. It's something that people believe in, something people feel is important. And if families feel something is important, they will engage with it. We've had a real issue with regards to COVID. COVID has now come into the arena. It's another infection that means that families are locking up their children, keeping their children. There's a real fear of allowing children out into the community. Unfortunately, what this does, it means that children aren't accessing the immunization programs that we have put in place for so many years. So all the effort that we have put in so far to ensure we have these very strong immunization programs, and I know India has a very powerful immunization program, reaching out to the rural areas, reaching out to underserved communities, and to those with comorbidities. We've heard the high-risk groups we're talking about. But the problem we're encountering now is that the children are being kept at home due to many of the policies. Schools are being closed, community centres are being closed, and that means that we have an alarming decline in the number of children receiving life-saving vaccines around the world, not just in India, but around the whole world. So you can see from this slide, the latest data is quite worrying. We are having 40 million children around the world actually missing out on life-saving vaccines. And that's even more so in low middle income countries. This then takes us to what's happening in India, and this is just a survey really to show you, and just really to illustrate, I mean, there's lots of evidence going around, but this is just a small survey which was conducted in 30 villages in Rajasthan. And that's actually quite some disturbing and alarming facts, which was that many, many children were actually missing out on their vaccinations. And if you actually calculate that up, that's about 5 million children missing their vaccinations, a huge amount, which will increase even further. So this isn't going down, this is actually going to be going up. Two reasons. One is everybody worries about vaccinations and safety, as we've talked about. And the other problem is that people are worried about actually taking their children out of the house into centres where there are other children and their child may pick up COVID. And so what we have is we have a real challenge on our hands, not only about the COVID infection at the moment, but about these other diseases rearing their heads again. As we don't get children vaccinated, we're going to have the risk of having measles, mumps, rubella, other life-threatening diseases, whilst at the same time trying to cope with the COVID problem as well at our hands. But people have been discussing vaccines for children, and where does this take us with vaccines for children? Are we going to have a vaccine? Should we have a vaccine? Shouldn't we have a vaccine? And it's always that tightrope that we're trying to walk. We need the confidence, we need the science, we need the safety, but we also recognize that if children are not vaccinated, getting them back out into society, having children engaging with education becomes much more difficult in the future. But there's lots of debates going on. There are some people who are asking for us to speed up the vaccines. And as we can see, we know the Oxford trial is trying now to start recruiting children as well as in recruiting adults. However, the debates will continue. My worry is that if we actually start introducing vaccines too quickly that are not safe for children, we will have repercussions. We've talked about taking families with us, communities with us. Communities need to feel that the vaccines that we are giving their children are safe, that they've been tested, they've been done properly. Children are not little adults at all. And therefore we need to ensure that we do this with the science behind us so that we take the communities with us, and so that when we do have a vaccine, the families will engage in the process and we can get these children back into society again. So if people think, I think my own view is, if people think there's going to be a vaccine very quickly for children, I don't think this is the case. And I wouldn't advocate we should do it quicker than we should. We should go for safety first, engagement with families, and then implementation of a vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Monica. So now, you know, if we have a vaccine and it's got to be sent out to the field and it has to be given to people, that's a huge challenge in itself. And our next guest is Dr. Pankaj Bhardwaj, who is currently working as a professor of community medicine at AIIMS in Jodhpur. He is an MBBS from Allahabad and an MD from Surat, and he focuses on vaccinology, and he is currently the nodal officer for the Adult Vaccination and Yellow Fever Vaccination Center, the only such center in the state of Rajasthan. And so, Dr. Pankaj, you know, the vaccine comes to you, and then what challenges do you have in actually rolling it out where you are? Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. First of all, I'll take this opportunity to say happy birthday to Jodhpur School of Public Health on its 12th birthday. And again, it's a great opportunity to be with the speakers like Dr. Reddy and Dr. Rao. So, the question which you've said, and thanks to all the earlier speakers in the panel when they've spoken about vaccination, that there would be some common challenges which I think every country and state is going to face, irrespective of whether it's a high income, low middle income country, or countries like India, where we have low performings as well as high performing states. And when I talk about all these common challenges which most of us are going to face would be regarding, that massive scale production where we can also ensure a kind of equitable distribution. The issues related to the cold chain management, which is a very important part when it comes to the field, and definitely the prioritization, because earlier in a country like ours, we would not be able to provide vaccine to each and every one of us. So a kind of prioritization that who will get the vaccine first would be a difficult thing to decide on field. The issues related to these pharmacovigilance and these safety issues, these post-licensure evaluation of effectiveness of vaccine, and the most difficult part, which I believe would be to involve the private sector, because in India, as we all know, that most of the healthcare facilities people prefer mostly to the private sector. Now the question arises that how states are going to, have these, how they are going to address these challenges, more so for my state of Rajasthan. As we say that vaccination or immunization delivery and the underlying health system framework, they are very closely connected. Just now, Dr. Monica has said about that story from Rajasthan where they have said that, unfortunately there is a dip down in the immunization system when the issues like COVID-19 are emerging. So I'll take the reference from one of a very good systematic analysis published in BMC, where they say, it's an article by David E. Phillips et al., where they say that, when there is a vaccine rolling or vaccine uptake, there are three primary determinants. The first one, which we say intent to vaccinate. The second one, facility readiness. And the third one, community access. So if I take the first one, intent to vaccinate, it will have two stakeholders. The first one, the persons who are going to be vaccinated, and the other one, doctors, nurses, who are going to give this vaccine. Much have been said by my earlier speakers about the persons or the community who are going to be vaccinated. So they have talked about vaccine hesitancy, denials, and the influence by all those negative news in the media. And, with our experience at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Jodhpur, where we started the adult vaccination clinic, we found that, there are issues related beyond that. Like, for example, if COVID-19 comes up with multiple doses scheduled, then it's going to be a tough job to have these compliance issues. Because in children, we know there are issues, but, in a country like ours, we don't have any adult vaccination policy. And in all those vaccines where there are multiple doses, there are issues of compliance related to such vaccines. In a city like Jodhpur, we have, a lot of elderly. So, cities also have their profiles. Rajasthan, like for example, in Jaipur, it's a bit younger city, but when it comes to Jodhpur, because of the work, people migrate from there, and here elderly people live. So the kind of system which needs to be there to get this priority would be a challenge for us. Now, the second point which, I was speaking about was facility readiness. So in state of Rajasthan, there are already ailing health system. So additional logistical complexity, additional manpower, their training issues, cold chain management is going to be a tough job. And when these COVID-19 vaccine comes into picture. And third part, which is the last but not the least, is this community access. If you look at the state of Rajasthan, more than 50% area is desert and tribal. So ensuring equitable access to these vaccines to all would be a difficult task. And as Hiri has very nicely said, that when it comes to vaccines, it's more about the ethno-socio-economic factors which play a very important role. And in Rajasthan, these issues are a bigger challenge than the down south of the country. But these are not the only the challenges only. We do have some opportunities. We do have some bright parts also. And I will end my, this discussion saying that, because in a country like ours, where if you look at the density of population, India has a density of population of around 382 people per square kilometer. But fortunately in Rajasthan, we are just 200 per square kilometer. So that would add to a kind of strength or a bit of, positive thing also. So as I mentioned, though there are challenges, but definitely there are some opportunities and strengths also. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Bhardwaj. And this actually ends the of our session. And I will hand it over now to Jagdish for the next segment. Jagdish.
Thanks, Roy. And it was really an enriching session about the vaccines and a lot of myths going around. And, I was just discussing offline with many of the other people that a lot of this information should be in the public domain. A lot of people, as Dr. Rao said, non-scientific people are handling this information. So it's very important that it goes that way. Our next speaker in this domain is Freddie Nigan. And it's so funny, Freddie, that, I answered this question about to my clients for last 10, 12 years, because I run an IT company, that why have you turned from a physician to a IT person? And funny that I'm asking you the similar question. And it's a fantastic resume that you have. And you are into biomedical optics research, translational research in cancer and atherosclerosis, nanotechnology, nanomedicine, nonprofit leadership, physician scientist development, healthcare innovation, and healthcare entrepreneurship. It's a dream come true for a guy like me, and how to convert our knowledge in medicine and how can we help in digital health. And I really I really congratulate you, Freddie. And my question again is the original question which is asked to me, but you are way ahead. As a physician and scientist, how did you come across organizing the hackathons? And I was part of it. It was fantastic. Congratulations to all of you. And please let the audience know, how did the idea come across and how is it coming through? Freddie.
Yeah, so hi. Well, thanks for that introduction. And just to quickly answer your question, I think the first of how did I get to the world of hackathons? And it's really that throughout my training and my career, having seen what we can do in the labs and in universities and institutes, but realizing that I wanted to figure out how to get this stuff translated out into the real world, into patients, and having real meaningful impact. And came across meeting Zen Chu, who was one of the original founders for MIT Hacking Medicine, and sort of the pioneering the healthcare hackathon model, at least at MIT. And so from that respect is how I first got connected to the group and came across the world of healthcare hackathons, which is really just sort of the very entry point for a lot of this innovation process that we're doing. To speak more specifically about the MIT COVID-19 challenge and how that was born, that came really in mid-March, when we had this propensity of this population of individuals who were being sent home, work from home, schools were shutting down, cities and state governments were shutting down. And so trying to channel all that untapped pool of talent and energy and people wanting to do something towards COVID-19 with the people who are facing these problems, which at the time were a lot of the healthcare systems, the hospitals, the vulnerable populations as well. And so that kicked off the challenge over the last, I can't believe it's now been 6 months now since we first initially started that journey.
Thank you, Freddie. And, I know you are rushing, so we had to, change the program a little bit. We, wish you all the best in the MIT COVID-19, and I'll, come over to Prasanna. Prashant Prasanna is working for Deloitte, and Prashant, you work for Deloitte and I work for Mobiloid. Many people say, I've copied this word. And, so I keep explaining that oit is in ancient Greek, it means movement. So we coined this like mobile movement. So, not exactly copied. We just got inspired that the movement is of mobile. And when I was going through your resume, it's so inspiring. And, the practical, practical applications of the AI, because our company is into blockchain and AI and IoT. So I look forward to that kind of a guidance. And we all are, because AI is reshaping the, world overall. And we think that, your experience and the kind of space you are into can really help everybody. Currently at Deloitte, I'll just read out his impressive resume, that he is a certified project management professional and leader within the strategy and analytics and cognitive practice. He brings experience leading complex engagements and enabling organizational transformation. And Prashant believes that he's, as an entrepreneur, and this is the best line that I could read, one needs to have the spirit of a pirate and the discipline of a Navy SEAL and a trust center for entrepreneurship. Yes, Prashant, I fully agree with you, and cannot deny that. But so our question is, I was part of the MIT COVID-19 challenge as a mentor, and we saw a lot of talent. And the $1 million question is again, what are the plans going forward? How do we take it forward? How can it really have an impact? And because you are an expert on the practical implementation of everything, how you personally are making a difference on that. Prashant, over to you, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jagdish, and thank you everyone for having me. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be. So, Jagdish, thank you for participating in the hackathon. I think we had about 3,700 applicants from about 60 countries, about close to 1,500 of them actually participating. So when we started off this whole journey of, hey, why don't we do something about like creating a hackathon, and why don't we work with Freddie to really partner with the broader MIT ecosystem and put out a hackathon, one of the founding principles and the founding mission for us was, hey, we don't want to like create a hackathon for the sake of creating a hackathon or running a hackathon. We want to make sure that we're sticking around as a core organizing committee and as MIT alums to make sure that there's solutions that are being brought to life over the course of time. So what that meant was to really stay engaged with the teams, to kind of help triage some of those ideas for some of the partners. So essentially what happened was like we had about 40 winners, right? But I think there's several ideas and several teams that were actually perhaps not declared as winners in the respective tracks, but were very, very good ideas. And we had about 70 partner companies working with us. And in speaking with them, what they mentioned to us was several of them have actually expressed interest in being able to incubate and take some of these ideas to the next level and bring them to fruition. So one request of ours was the MIT group was can you guys help triage? Like we've had a number of great ideas come in, but we don't know which team to engage with, and we don't want to spin our wheels. Can you help do the matchmaking? Can you triage on our behalf? And that is essentially what we as a small group of alums are doing right now. So the month of October, we've really are drilling down with our respective tracks, each of those teams, to figure out if there are, incubators and accelerators we can connect them to amongst the partner ecosystem. The other thing also is that we've given them, unlimited access to the mentors that were part of the ecosystem, the judges, and they also have a post-hack guide with several resources. And we ourselves are constantly checking in with the teams and constantly just making sure that they are getting the traction to move forward. So that's really what we're committed to, and we're hoping to see some progress by the end of this month. So.
Yes, thanks, Prashant. I have another, question, or maybe, in my personal capacity also, because, last time we discussed that at Mobiloid, we could potentially incubate the blockchain, AI, and IoT initiatives at MIT COVID-19 challenge. Whether or not they were winners, we have the facility at Okhla, New Delhi office, and, maybe many of us like that, the partner companies, the mentors would have such kind of facilities. And it would be good, I think, maybe to set up a meeting to take it forward, because it's a great initiative, really, really great initiative of COVID-19, MIT COVID-19 challenge. And we all want it to, have a real impact on ground. And so I again congratulate you, Prashant, for all your team and the kind of work you all did. And thank you so much, Prashant. And now I have a worthy winner. I'm happy to introduce Guillermo Simon. Guillermo, you are there?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hi, yes. So, it's great to see you in person, and, great to know you that, you are a winner of MIT COVID-19 hackathon. And I know that's very competitive. So, again, really congratulating you for your, achievement. So Guillermo is an incoming MBA candidate at Massachusetts Institute of Technology at MIT. And he has been a management consultant for Deloitte and EY. And he has been working for a variety of Fortune 500 companies. And he has background in economics, business, and technology. And that's why he is an interested advisor to the C-level companies. And his preparation for his time is chosen to fight against COVID-19 as co-founder and CEO of vPool Incorporation. His team's focus has turned to developing a computational testing strategy that leverages artificial intelligence to enable intelligent pooled testing for fast and efficient disease outbreak management. The in thing, we're absolutely in thing. Guillermo, congratulations. This is absolutely the need of the hour. Over to you to explain it to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jagdish, and thank you everyone for having me, and congratulations again on this auspicious day to have your anniversary, it must be said. So as Jagdish was mentioning, I'm a management consultant by training, and when COVID hit, I felt like I wanted something, especially in preparation for school. And the opportunity presented itself with the 2 MIT COVID-19 hackathons that Freddie and his team wonderfully organized. And that was a great platform to start thinking about problems generated by the COVID-19 crisis and potential ways to solve it. And I'd quickly love to share with you guys what we've been working on and our progress so far. The problem that we focused on back then, I was particularly focused on the issue of testing shortages. This is, of course, an issue that is widespread, but it is particularly compelling in low resource settings, like India and my country, El Salvador. But within the context of the US, with over, this slide is outdated, with over 7 million coronavirus infections and 1 million deaths worldwide, and the US accounts for 20% of them. When it comes to managing pandemics, molecular testing is, of course, a vital need. I think that the US is, it's been said many times that testing should be ramped up to 30 million a week at least. Many say 30 million per day. But meanwhile, the US is doing less than 10 million tests every week. And so, of course, this matching the demand with just testing supply is supremely improbable. And so one idea that has been leveraged in Israel and Germany is that of pool testing. And the way the pool testing works is you mix and combine samples from multiple people, and then you test them as one with a single test kit. And then the idea is that you test that one pool, and if it returns negative, then that confirms that everyone that you sampled was negative. And then if it comes back positive, that's when you do the individual analysis of each sample to try and ascertain who was positive and who's negative. And so if you manage to consistently group people that are negative, of course, this represents an incredible capacity increase. Just in this example, with these 12 samples that we grouped into pools of 4, with individual testing, you would have done 12 tests. With pool testing, you would have completed 7. And so you're managing that population with less tests. In the US, the potential increase is really incredible. This is a neat map that came in the New York Times when pool testing was initially being discussed by Dr. Fauci back in July. but the methodology is not new. It's been done for HIV. It's been done for malaria since since World War II. But the problem that we focused on is that you'll notice that some states here in the United States have a less potential for increase, and that's because pool testing has a flaw, and it's that of the prevalence rate or the positivity rate of the disease. Because as I said, it relies on batching specimens that are negative. And so if there's a high probability of a positive sample that might spoil that pool, then pooling is pointless. And one example that we like to give is in the state of Florida, where Quest Diagnostics is this big lab that's doing 150,000 tests every day. They were given the permission by the FDA to do pool testing, but then a couple of days later, that same director from Quest Diagnostics said that they can't do it because pool testing is, COVID is too prevalent. And therefore, they just resorted back to individual testing. And so what we've been working on, I'm excited to share, is that our platform is specifically designed to address that problem. It artificially reduces the prevalence by arranging samples of only negative samples, essentially arranging pools of only negative samples. And we can do that by taking into the account the data that is being collected by labs today when they take a specimen, like a patient zip code, whether they're coming in because they have symptoms, or whether they're coming in because they're a part of a contact tracing hit. All of this data can be fed into a classification algorithm to try and determine a pre-test probability of testing negative for COVID-19. And based on that, we can arrange pools of only negative pools. And so that way we increase testing capacity by a lot. And the algorithm doesn't care what kind of test you use. It can be PCR, it can be antibody, it can be antigen. We know that Verily, a Google company, is doing oral fluid pool testing. It can be done for next generation sequencing. People always ask us whether this effort dies when the vaccine is found, and the answer is no, because it can be used for other infectious diseases. And so the idea is to test more people using less test kits, basically. And what we've found by running our model in a precision FDA data set is that with this approach, we can increase testing capacity by 300% and save up to 60% of test kits used. So that is, of course, an incredible capacity increase. It's been a wonderful journey so far. We started in April in that first hackathon. We were very fortunate to have one, and then my team and I we chose to stick together, and we participated in the second round of the hackathon. That was in June, and we happened to win again. And so since then we thought, okay, maybe we do have something. We incorporated, we submitted a provisional patent. We were reached out to by University of California and several others that are interested in our pooling approach. And, from September onward, it's really going to be a matter of figuring out how to deploy this as soon as possible. We've been accepted into the Creative Destruction Lab cohort. We've been invited to speak at the Health Conference 2020 virtual, which is going to take place in a couple of weeks. And really, I'm just excited for a way to help out, and I'm very happy that through the hackathon, we were able to really form an all-star team. I am by no means, an expert in epidemiology. My background is in economics and data analytics, but our team has formed in terms of complementary skill sets. Experts in bioengineering, biomedical engineering, doctors of medicine, pathologists, data scientists, you name it. And I'm very happy for the chance to tell you guys a little bit about what we've been working on. If you have any questions, or if you're curious, or if you feel like this would be helpful within your network in India, of course, this is especially compelling in low resource settings, and we're hoping to help out as much as we can. So again, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Guillermo. And great to see a very practical implementation of AI, and we'll talk offline. Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Over to Roy again.
Thank you so much, and that was absolutely fantastic. So congratulations once again to the team at WePool. This actually flows very well into our next guest, who is Bhautik Chatterjee. And Bhautik is the Executive Director of Innovation and Research at Lifebridge Health, which is based in Baltimore. It's a 2.5 billion, that's billion with a B, dollar health system with about 2,900 doctors and 5 hospitals. So Bhautik is in charge of the innovation, research, and bio-incubator programs. And he is also in charge of the digital health partnerships with tech startups, implementation of all sorts of things like the apps, mobile apps, AI, predictive analytics, and patient monitoring, so on and so forth. So there is a lot of things over here in the bio. But let me turn to you with the first question, Bhautik. So at this time of COVID-19, when you have to keep people safe, and these are the people that actually work under you or work under the organization that you are with, how did your health systems manage the personal protective equipment needs, the PPE needs for COVID-19 at the height of the pandemic? And I would say that we're still in some ways at the height. So that's the first question. And then from that, maybe you can flow into the second part, which are, what are some of the innovative ways that you are using telemedicine, the apps, AI, to actually tackle COVID-19? Over to you, Bhautik.
Sure, thank you, Roy, and thank you, Anil, for organizing this panel discussion today, and happy birthday to the program, to the public health program. At the height of the pandemic, which hit Baltimore and the Maryland area in the United States back around March, April timeframe, we had a crisis on our hands because the traditional supply chain for PPE was disrupted, with a lot of our vendors being in China, which is also affected obviously by COVID. And we did not have any way to really access the masks, the isolation gowns, and the face shields that we needed for our system. And we have about 13,000 employees, both clinical and non-clinical, at Lifebridge Health. And we knew that we needed approximately 10,000 masks a day for our non-clinical staff. So we had N95 access and PAPRs for our clinical staff, but for our administrative staff, for the support, we needed some type of other solution. So being in innovation and research, we got very creative and tried to think out of the box. And we're fortunate to have Under Armour, which is one of the largest sports textile manufacturers here in the United States, in Baltimore in their headquarters. So we contacted their innovation team, and they were very helpful to us and found a way to make a fabric mask that can be folded by our staff, and you don't need to use a sewing machine, and this can be folded within a couple of minutes. So I had the challenge to take unused hospital space in one of our buildings and convert it into a PPE factory, and we had to get that up and running within 5 days. So we were able to take some of our staff who were not as busy because of lower volumes in some of our clinical settings and train them in folding these masks. And we also had the challenge of making sure that this was a safe environment, because we had around 100 staff members and managers operating this factory. So it was an incredible experience, and I had to draw on a lot of my business school learnings around Toyota manufacturing, efficient manufacturing, but also bring in a very clinical perspective to keep that safety, because we did not want to have COVID infection spread in the factory itself. So we were very lucky to get that advice and expertise from the Under Armour company. So looking outside healthcare and being creative. And we were able to create 260,000 masks from that factory. We also did purchase sewing machines because we needed to sew isolation gowns for our doctors and nurses on the front lines seeing COVID patients. So we were able to create 25,000 gowns. We also utilized 3D printers We got donations from some of the local schools in Baltimore and set up a 3D printing farm. And that was used to create face shields and face adjustments for some of our other PPE devices as well. So we used the combination of the PPE factory and the 3D printing donations. And for us, it was really like a wartime effort. Even though it was a very stressful situation, I was struck by the positive attitudes and enthusiasm of our staff and our industry partners to help this up and running. Fortunately, after a couple of months, we were able to get our traditional suppliers back. So we did not need to continue that effort, but it was very helpful in April and May timeframe to have that PPE factory up and running. And then on the digital health side, in terms of innovations that our team has been involved with for COVID, I'll mention two of them. The first one is a mobile app that we're using for remote patient monitoring. It's called Get Well Loop, and it's a mobile app that our patients can download. It has many different use cases. Before COVID, we were using it for communication post-discharge with our patients if they have questions around their medication, around follow-up appointments, or if they need to do rehab exercises after surgery, they can use this app platform to communicate with their doctors and nurses from the comfort of their home. With COVID, we ended up creating a new loop for patients who had received COVID tests, but there was a delay, again, back in the spring, especially up to 7 to 10 days while they're waiting for their test results. And so they're very anxious, they're not sure what to do. If their symptoms are worsening, should they go to the ED? Can they talk to a doctor or nurse? This app enabled them to have that two-way communication. And we were able to get over 5,000 patients active on this Get Well Loop platform. We also have a virtual hospital here in Baltimore, which is staffed by PAs and nursing practitioners who respond to these calls. It's actually an international program. So we have one virtual hospital here in Baltimore, but we also have a call center in Manila in the Philippines and another call center in Jerusalem in Israel that is staffed by clinical call center employees as well. So that's one example of what we call remote patient monitoring and digital health. It's also really helpful that the reimbursement policies have changed so that we can get reimbursed for this online activity and online monitoring. This is new in the United States, and it's as a result of COVID that we're able to get reimbursed. There's new billing codes for online activity. The second example I wanted to share is our mobile clinic initiative. And this touches on some of the comments made by Dr. Lakhanpal around pediatric immunizations and the importance of continuing those in light of the COVID pandemic. So we found that, in Baltimore, there is a lot of income inequality and difference in social demographics. The life expectancy for some of our lower income neighborhoods is 20 years less than the higher income neighborhoods in parts of Baltimore. So we're talking about age expectations of 64 years versus 84 years. So when we're trying to engage with those patients in the lower income neighborhoods, they have a lot of social determinants challenges. They may not have access to transportation, access to smartphones. They may have mental health issues, addiction issues. So it's a challenge to engage those patients. So we've decided, why don't we take shuttle buses from Lifebridge Health, equip them with a nurse, a social worker, and a driver, provide them with COVID testing kits and an iPad so that they can conduct virtual visits. And we had them drive over to the apartment buildings. We did this in a pilot over 6 weeks, and we were able to see over 300 patients through this program. Initially, the patients did express some fear about having our staff enter inside their apartments because of fear of infection. So we then pivoted to a neighborhood tent model. So we utilized common spaces in the apartment buildings and set up a neighborhood tent model, and that increased the volume significantly because patients had less anxiety about being in an outdoor space. As a result of this program, we found that 80% of the patients that we saw had uncontrolled blood pressure. So that was a major concern. The second thing that we found was that 30% of them had not seen a primary care physician in the last 1 year. So based on the impact of this program, we did receive funding and approval to now continue over the next 6 months, and we're adding pediatric immunization as a use case into this mobile clinic program. So we're looking forward to see what the results are like. And I think this is a really important way for us to use digital health. It's not just about flashy apps for young consumers in urban centers. It's about really redefining how we deliver care and engage our communities and vulnerable populations through digital health and through more direct engagement.
Thank you so much, Bothik, and I know that you have to leave soon, so we thank you for your flexibility in having the schedule slightly, shall we say, shifted out of order. And you've actually shown us how we can take the crisis that COVID-19 is, and from that truly find opportunity to take this technology forward so that even in a post-COVID world, these apps, this sort of AI applicability will be of benefit to so many people who would not otherwise have the access to the services that you just spoke about. So with that, we will now flow into our final segment, which is called When Worlds Collide. And, you know, for the last few episodes of the series, we've actually featured people in the health field themselves who have experienced COVID. And so their professional and personal worlds have converged in a way that perhaps they would have never truly anticipated. So we've got two guests over here. The first is Dr. Jitendra Singh Makar, who is working as a senior interventional cardiologist at the Eternal Heart Care Center in Jaipur. And our second guest in this segment is Rakhi Nair, who is presently working as the Director of Planning and Development at the NICE Foundation in Hyderabad. And she is at the moment focusing on maternal and child health. But in keeping with the theme of the series from HIV/AIDS to COVID, she actually has worked in the past on HIV/AIDS with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So let me first turn to Dr. Makar with your story. Please share with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Roy, and thank you, Dr. Anil, for involving me again in this beautiful webinar, and congratulations for Jodhpur Public Health Center, which has completed 12 years now. I'll cut the story short because we are already behind the schedule. And I recently had COVID infection, and now fortunately I'm in front of you. I'm feeling good now. Little bit of background. I'm running 50th year now. 49 I've completed, fortunately without any comorbidities. And I work like horses, and I see around 2,000 outpatients in a month and do around 200 cath procedures in my cath lab. And ours is the highest volume center in Jaipur, in private sector, of course. And my working hours were average 12 hours. And you can say I used to work 6.5 days because Sunday also till lunch I used to work. So I think the COVID has come to me with all the blessings, and I'm going to change my life. All my friend physicians who are here, they should also do that without acquiring COVID. But now I realize that life can be fragile, though I am okay, I've overcome it. But I'll schedule myself, I'll learn to say no to patient that I can't see you today. I'll start giving dates, make my list up to next month or next to next month, whatever. But I'll, reorganize my life. So I don't know actually from where I contracted, but looking at my outpatient and my volume, even in March and April, 2 months we were, left with less work. But from May onward, the work was almost same for me. And every day I used to see patients, cardiac patient without any COVID symptom, admitted, screened for COVID, tested positive. So I knew that I am in the loop. And I have seen here in Jaipur at least that most of the healthcare workers who have been involved in COVID, who have acquired COVID, are actually not working in the COVID area. Those even in our center is also a COVID center, and those who are working in COVID area, they are less affected because they are in proper gears, and we are sometimes tend to become casual, those who are working in non-COVID areas, particularly in outpatient. So I stopped using stethoscope since March onwards, and used a proper mask and did everything. But if I can point out, I thought from where I must have got it. So I can point out to one incident that 165, 70-year-old gentleman was sitting in front of me, cardiac patient. He was coughing though, and his mask was like, a towel hanging on a hook. So, I said, please, wear your mask properly. But 2, 3 times his mask fell down and he was speaking very loudly, and then he turned out to be COVID positive, though he didn't have much symptoms, and then home quarantine. So I can point out that maybe chronologically also I came in that contact with that patient. But I believe that if things get longer and longer, and as you guys are saying that vaccine will also take time, then whom to get it, how to get it, and cold chain and everything in India. So I think most of our population has to get it. We have to get ready for it, and more precautions we take, I think your exposure will be less, and maybe I'm no scientific logic behind it, but if viral dose you get is less, maybe you will symptoms of severity of your disease will get less, because nowadays media is also saying mask is vaccine. I wrote a small blog on social media a few months back, in fact, when Rajasthan COVID was not that prevalent, about slow and safe exposure, where by slow I meant that if a large population shouldn't get it quickly, so that healthcare is not burdened, and safe exposure that if we keep protecting ourselves, keep washing our hand, keep mask on, then maybe a less viral dose which will act like a vaccine. There are some vaccine which are actually low dose of the organism. So I used to believe in that, and one of my friend one day said, "Bhaiya, ye to sabko hoga na." I mean, he wanted to say that this will happen to everyone. So I believe that if not everyone, before the virus gets tired or the virulence goes down, most of us are going to get it. So we have to protect ourselves from a high viral dose. My symptoms started funny way as a backache. So I went for the physiotherapy. I thought I keep on wearing that lead pen, maybe it is because of that. But then I started having myalgia. Then I thought, brother, this is something different. So I isolated myself. But then there was a CRT-D patient admitted. He wanted device from me only, and otherwise he said I'll get discharged. And I didn't have fever till that time. I was hesitating to get a test done. So I went for a few hours to hospital also, maintained distance from my juniors, and actually one of my associate only did it. I sat in the control room of cath lab. Then when I came back that was Saturday and Sunday, I had fever. Then I got test and tested positive. Then I had respiratory symptoms. Then my physicians said that you should get admitted and get these drugs. So when ambulance, came to pick me up, then I was a little bit emotional. I'm generally a strong person. I asked my daughters to show their faces from first floor when I was going towards the ambulance. One of my daughters studies at Yale, and fortunately before lockdown, she came to us and she's with us, and she's doing her online stuff and all. So they said me goodbye. Then I went there. Then for the 4 or 5 days were difficult. But when I saw my own hospital atmosphere, how people are working in COVID ward, so I said, no, this is not only for their, bread and butter. This is not only for, to earn something, but this is really the service they're kind of doing, because what it takes to, quit the job for 6 months and then join back as a nurse anywhere. These nurses and our junior doctors, they can do it any day, leave a job for 6 months, 1 year and join back everyone, but they are continuing. So I will say that the nurses who are taking care of me, I can't identify them if I meet them again. But if they wear that mask and shield and they smile, then I'll identify, yes, this was the sister who took care. They were so good, and our hospital is also providing very good COVID care, I would say, and we have a good recovery rate. So I was admitted around for 5 days and got remdesivir. Now, with the evidence or without evidence, I don't know I was overtreated or not, because once I was admitted, I stopped reading about COVID treatment because I had to act like a patient, not like a doctor. I didn't suggest a single thing, whatever steroid, anticoagulant, remdesivir I got, but I fortunately got better and better, came back, 3 weeks full isolation. First time in my life, I rested for 3 weeks and got admitted in any kind of hospital for any kind of disease. I have joined back this Monday, but now I am very careful about my work, and I have made a target for few days that 4 o'clock I have to leave the hospital. But as the time goes, as I said, that I reschedule my life, reorganize my life. It was a wonderful experience. I tell my patients who get heart attack and they smoke, I said, you quit smoking, heart attack, you have survived a heart attack and you won't get a lung cancer. So you are getting a double benefit of having a heart attack. So it's the positive attitude that we carry in our life. So maybe I got a COVID, so I won't get a myocardial infarction because of my working style. So I took that very positively. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jitendra, and we are so thankful that we have you safe and sound and sharing this story with us. So thank you for that. And the final speaker, last but not least, also sharing her story, Raki, over to you.
Thank you, Roy, and thank you, everyone, and thanks for having me here. And basically, I'm supposed to be talking about my experiences, but I think I'm very, very, humbled by Dr. Jitendra's experiences that I've heard. And yeah, but so I also want to actually congratulate JSPH for the 12 years that they have completed. I mean, that's a dozen. And believe me, this disease is not something that anyone should get. It is not good, not a good feeling at all. Today is my 18th day since I was tested positive, and I'm glad that I can share some of my experiences. It sounds depressing, but I think I've learned a lot. Being a healthcare worker, I had more responsibility again to see that I do everything to stay away from the virus by adhering to the norms of social distancing and others, but which I did seriously for some time. But I think just like every other lay person, my thought processes chose to slip away for some time, and then looking at the death versus infection versus the recovery rates and ratio numbers. And then, it's more like, oh, the death rates are so small, it's so minuscule. So it was more like, it's not going to affect me much, but even if it does, I think I can handle it. So because I can handle it because I do everything to keep myself fit. I do yoga, I do, all my fitness regimes. So there's this kind of overconfidence, I think, which took over me. And then I think I slipped away somewhere. And so I've seen my other colleagues also do well in the hospital. So I thought, there's nothing much to be bothered about it. But I think the problem started after my routine work-related travel that I came. And I usually choose to travel long distances during this COVID period by road. And hence, I usually end up having this problem of backaches. And so I started complaining of backaches and body aches. But this time it wasn't usual than I usually complain. And then it was really, really bad. And this followed with a fever of 101 and 102. I waited for a couple of days and then gulped down some medicines and painkillers, but I did not find relief. And then I kind of voluntarily went to the laboratory and I said, I'd like to give my sample. But I kept repeating to myself that this is just going to be a viral flu. It's not going to be COVID. And I had similar symptoms some months ago, but not as bad as this. So even then I had tested negative. So mentally I was in a state of denial. So, and because I was tested negative initially, so I was not ready to accept this report. The next day I was informed by my doctors that, my report was positive, and then I couldn't believe it. I went back again to a couple of other physicians and I said, do you think that this is a false positive? Because that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear that this could be just a viral flu. So I think, Raki, there's nothing much to worry about it. But none of them really told me what I wanted to hear. They all said, no, I think you really need to get going to your house and get into isolation. So it's time that you start on drugs. And they started me on Fabiflu and other antibiotics. And I kind of, it was a little devastating in the beginning. I never thought I'm not going to be able to take it so well. Yes, initial couple of days, I started, spending the whole day watching television, listening to songs, basically with an intent to distract myself. But I think that is where the problem remained. The problem was that I consciously wanted to distract myself. And hence that remained too short because I was making a conscious effort to distract myself. So this physical trauma was adding to the psychological trauma, and I was kind of debating with both of it. And then I understood that I was somewhere, being a clinical psychologist, I could understand this is, I am somewhere at depression. And so with this, I also added on, I also had fever in some days, and then I had severe body aches and pains. Started off with cold and nasal congestion, which made it very difficult to breathe. But my doctors were they started me on drugs, and then I had to report every 4th hourly. And also, I think the doctors of my hospital get the credit of actually training me on how to self-video yourself, because I was not very tech savvy. And so they said every 4th hour, you're going to open up the tablets and you're going to, gulp it goes to IT credit goes to all our doctors. So and I had to send details of my temperatures, of the saturation levels and things like that. Over a period of time, I realized that my energy levels dropped completely, and I wasn't even doing any kind of minimal physical exercises as well. I stopped talking to families and friends as I didn't want them to get worried. And by 5th and 6th day, I was so depressed that I was all the time thinking whether even I'm going to make it alive. Today, I think when I look back, I think it's just because Hyderabad is a big city. I stay alone, and which otherwise loneliness is something that I really love. And but this was scary. This time it was really scary because I didn't know what would happen the next morning. I mean, are they just going to, come and find me not alive? So all kind of thoughts anxiety started piling up. But the doctors and the hospital management, they really did a wonderful job taking care, calling me up for medicine, whether it was food and follow-up calls. And I also had this weird thoughts even when my saturation levels would drop from 98 to 96. It never dropped below 96, but I never wanted to see it below 98. I wanted to keep it constantly 98. So that was something. So I've also understood that this whole journey of physical issues coupled with the psychological trauma, actually coupled with the uncertainty, again coupled with not being able to be with your near ones or your loved ones, actually makes the journey a little difficult one. The disease is not certainly that one should take it very casually. Friends, this is dead serious. The numbers mean nothing. Once you're affected, it is 100%, period. So, I cannot think something like the way I was initially thinking about the numbers, the global scenario. There comes a lot of responsibility, of course, now that now I am, during my post-COVID, I have to be, because during my work, I take care of a lot of mothers, a lot of newborns, basically. We handle neonates. So I know the amount of responsibility now that comes along with it. And, but I feel I've definitely come out very strong. And But the anxiety of reinfection, I think that lingers around. And the post-COVID scenario is again something which is very distressing, because there's a lot of physical energy dropout that you see. You find very difficulty to concentrate and do your daily activities. Yeah, but yesterday I was reading an article actually on mental health issues doubles the odd of dying with COVID-19 by Dennis Thompson, I think. And it was a nice study, which I can share it later with all of you, but it says that patients diagnosed with any kind of a psychiatric problem, anxiety or depression, dementia, psychosis, were up to 2.3 times more likely to die in the hospital from COVID-19. So I think one of our panelists, I think Ashwin, Ashwin was really talking about it. This is not, this is not something which is just physical. I mean, you just cannot take out the psychological part of the anxiety or depression that comes along with this problem. Yes, I think we all have a journey to go, a long journey, not an easy one. And I wish all of you and all your loved ones a very safe journey through COVID. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that truly heartfelt and frank story. And thanks to Jitendra as well for having shared. And this once again, I suppose, captures all the aspects of what we spoke about, the psychosocial, mental health aspects, the physical aspects, the need for, patients and the public to have trust in the health system and the government. So through the personal and the professional, I think we've come full circle. So with this, let me hand over to the rapporteurs for the session today. So over to you guys. Thank you.
COVID-19 is very different from HIV in its mode of transmission and the rapid global spread of this pandemic, which has led to the quarantine of 1/5 of the world's population. It's unprecedented. However, the 4 decades of response to the HIV epidemic offer lessons that are vital for the fight against COVID-19 and the stigma that it creates. Now, coming to the first panelist, Neeraj, he talked about the importance of appreciation of resources. And he also said about the human behavior changes that is becoming critical, the non-pharmaceutical interventions. He also insisted on public health advocacy by private and media should be emphasized. And next, coming to the Ashwin, he talked about mental health, and he said that COVID is just a wake-up call and impact on youth and freshness should be there. And he pointed out a very important point that starting early on mental health management, that mental health management should be included in a curriculum actually. And mental health is also a public health issue. And capacity building is very important at the community level. It's a very important need of our nowadays. And Hedi's great presentation is so very informative. Coming to the Dr. Reddy, and thank you for pointing out the misinformation that media and everyone talks about. Now it's a time of responsibility to be taken and providing the right information with the media and communication. And last but not the least, he also talked about partnership and global solidarity should be there in communication. And over to Kandar.
Yeah, thank you, Ashishji. The next panelist was J.V.R. Prasad Rao. So he gave out a very important statement that science should be done by scientists and not the media person or the politicians, which is very apt in today's circumstances, as we are seeing. And one more thing he pointed out while looking for the vaccine, looking at the efficacy is also very important. And his idea of developing a database, just like it is being done in West Bengal, a database of people with comorbidities, I think it should be done on a national level to ensure, better prioritization of vaccines. Then next we had, thank you, Prasadji. Next we have Monica ma'am. Monica ma'am, great presentation, and thank you for making us aware of the huge impact vaccines usually have on the children in general. And vaccine disruptions due to COVID-19, you rightly pointed out that these disruptions due to the COVID-19 have definitely, is a matter of concern and have led to problems as far as immunization programs are concerned. Thank you, ma'am, for your great presentation. Moving on to Pankaj, sir. Highlighting the cold chain part and the pharmacovigilance part of the vaccination was very important from your side, because obviously once the vaccine is made, making it available for the masses becomes an issue for the government and the hospitals catering to the population. Experience of aims and issues with compliance were very well raised points for you. And also you raised a very important point on facility readiness and community access. I mean, how would the community be able to access the vaccine? And one more good thing you pointed out was since there is no concrete program for adult vaccination, because India's vaccination program is mostly based on children, and there is not much of adult vaccination going on. So again, compliance by the adults would be a difficult task as far as the community is concerned. Moving to Freddie and Srinath Prasanna, thank you for telling us about the hackathon event and how nicely it progressed and what are the plans moving forward. Thank you for that. Moving to Guillermo, congrats and best of luck for the future. Congrats on winning the hackathon events on both the occasions in April and June. Great presentation, and you're doing awesome work as far as DPool is concerned. And I hope the stats produced by you will catch the eye of many business people out there, and definitely make pool testing one of the leading things as far as the future is concerned, not just COVID-19, but as you rightly pointed out, not just the COVID-19 pandemic, but the other pandemics which might come in the future. And moving on to Pathik Chatterjee, thanks for sharing your innovation experience. I mean, times like these call for such innovations, and the thing which you did with your factory, producing factory, essentially, shows us that every hospital can potentially make itself self-sufficient and move towards a better healthcare, to provide healthcare to both the people who are coming to the hospital as well as the people who are serving the people who are coming to the hospital. And kudos to your team on accomplishing such an incredible task. Great work on the Get Well Loop app and the virtual hospital with all these call centers in Jerusalem and the Philippines. Good point on the reimbursements. India needs it. Many hospitals, if they are providing digital access telemedicine, basically, if they are providing telemedicine services, there should be a rule for reimbursements in India as well, as you pointed out rightly. And best of luck for the future with your workshop and everything. And then Dr. Makkar and Raki ma'am, great hearing you. Thank you so much for sharing your COVID-19 experience with us. We hope all the attendees and the panelists will learn something from it and will take care of the symptoms. As soon as they, God forbid they don't get it, but if they do, they will surely take care of that. And thank you for reminding us. And Raki ma'am rightly pointed out that it looks nice on the papers as the recovery rates are very high and the death rates are very low, but once you get it, it's 100% period, as Raki ma'am said, so in her exact words. So we wish you good health for the future, ma'am and sir, and that's all from our side. We move to Anil sir for the closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Kandar. Thank you, everybody. It's been a great webinar. I know we ran out over the time, and it's always the case, but I think this was just the beginning, and we'll take this forward, and we all will be staying connected, and you will hear from us very soon, and a report would be generated and published, and we hope to work with everybody, and let's make COVID-19 history, and we have to work together on that. And thank you all, and I will be in touch with everybody, and over to Bhupesh to take his favorite picture.
I request everybody, thank you very much, all the panelists, for taking out your time, and let's just request all the panelists to turn on the camera, and we'll have a group picture and keep the memories of this webinar, this wonderful webinar. Can we just turn on the camera and wave our hands and make it memorable? Smile, please. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks.